Welcome to the Red Text.
A crossroads of the holy and heretical.
Join us now for another episode in Unholy Communion.
Welcome y'all to another episode of the Red Text Podcast. I'm your co-host Ryan, aka the Mestizo Mystic on Instagram.
Hello, I am Fonzie. I am Witch Illumiscente on Instagram and Twitter.
How you doing today, Fonzie?
I'm in such a good mood, honestly. Like, I know I say that every episode. I need to come up with, like, I wish I was not in a good mood whenever we record, because that gives me something else to talk about than being in a good mood. But I'm always in a good mood. I always look forward to sitting and talking about all of the magical stuff that we have to talk about. So, I'm good. I'm really, really good. Work, my like everyday life work thing, the thing that pays the bills, is doing okay. And you know, my magical work is doing okay too. Like this is getting really fun now that we're kind of moving into Easter, or we are in Easter season, but when we're going closer into the Easter holiday, I'm getting excited because I have some magic planned, some magic that I'm planning to do for each day of Holy Week, which is kind of the topic. But so yeah, I'm getting really, really excited. I'm kind of revving myself up for doing some really incredible magical stuff. So nice. But how are you? You are not at home right now. You are
not at home right now.
Recording remotely. Yeah. Well, it is your bedroom. I mean, I don't know. Listen,
it is now.
Yeah, it is now. But Ryan, how are you doing, my darling friend?
Yes,
how are you doing?
I could not be fucking happier. Because it's just hella funny, because our last recording you referred to at the time my man who wasn't my man as my boyfriend, and now as of this recording he is my boyfriend. So that's where I'm at. I mean, my boyfriends are in Portland. And you know what? I don't mind saying what I'm about to say, because none of my coworkers know my life, because I don't talk to any of them like that. I faked having COVID so I could get more time off to spend more time in Portland with my man. And it was probably the best decision I ever could have fucking made. And I only did it because our company gave us COVID PTO. And I've made it this far without getting COVID. Gonna knock on wood. And I'm like, fuck that. I deserve some time off. I want this Monty to just fucking chill up here and get out of this city for a bit. We'll get out of San Francisco City. But yeah, we're good. I'm good. Me and my multiple personalities are good. Just exploring Portland. I came out a great time. Beautiful weather up here. And just eating a lot of good food. Spending a lot of quality time with my boo. And it's been real good. I could not be happier. Magic wise, I haven't been doing too much magic. Magic wise, so this was my first time meeting my man's friends, and so before I left San Francisco, I got each of his friends as well as himself novena candles for specific purposes. So I got him and his housemate a Abre Camino candle for each of them, and then I got one of his friends, Llama Clientes, because she is a tattoo artist, so she was struggling with getting some clientele. So I was like, this is perfect. And that's before I even knew she was like still working on getting clients. And then I got another friend of his, a lucky Siete Colores candle, so 7-color lucky candle, just to help bring luck in all aspects of their life. And then I got each of them the red thread bracelets with the Mal de Ojos on them, which is crazy because I got me and my man one and every one of his friends. And mine broke, like, I just bought it a week ago. And I'm pretty sure, I am more than sure, it was because when me and my boo were at the grocery store the other day getting some seasoning so I can make us dinner, this dude was like, made a homophobic comment in passing around us. And like, he didn't confront us, but like, he avoided the seasoning aisle. And he said something about us taking forever, even though we were there for 2 seconds, and then said something about us being gay, and then walked away. I come back to his apartment, to my boo's apartment, and as I'm taking the bracelet off, mind you, I'm not yanking it, I'm just pulling it off as I usually do. It just fucking snaps. And I'm like, I've had this shit for not even a full week, and it fucking broke. So I was like, see y'all, like, Ojo is real. Like, it is out there. It, like, is one of the most common spiritual ailments that people will come across.
Oh, for
And I
sure,
just
for
thought that was
sure.
very interesting. I just thought that was super interesting that it broke, which sucked because I got me and my boyfriend matching mal de ojo bracelets. They each had like a little pendant with La Virgen de Guadalupe on it with red ojos. So I thought it was cute. I was like, oh, look, I got us matching bracelets, and now mine's fucking broken. But that just goes to show spiritual protection, y'all.
Yeah, I would much rather it work, and it looked like it worked, so that's good.
But I'm excited to talk about all this magic coming up on Holy Week. I mean, I'm not 100% sure when this episode's scheduled for release, but I'm just excited to learn about Holy Week with our former guest, Micheal, aka Saintly Tarot Mystic, because I didn't really do anything special for Holy Week last year. So I'm hella excited to talk about it and the magic that can be done tonight during this episode's recording and incorporate it into this year's Holy Week in my craft. So with that said, Micheal, would you mind reintroducing yourself for those who it might be their first time meeting you tonight?
What's up, everybody? I'm glad to be back on the Red Text podcast. I am Micheal Therese McQueen. I'm Saintly Tarot Mystic on Instagram, and also the owner and tarot reader for Sacred Eyes Tarot on the internet. So I'm glad to be back with you all to talk about Holy Week.
How are you doing, Micheal? How's life?
Life is interesting. It is a very interesting time in the spiritual world of Micheal McQueen.
Let's hear about it.
How does it go? It's the best of times, and it is
It's
the
the
worst
worst
of
of
times.
times, darling. Yes.
Yes. Depending on who you're asking. But it's as we're recording this episode, we're still kind of in the tides of Lent, and my Lenten sacrifice just isn't going as planned. It's just not going as well as I thought it would go, and I am a weak motherfucker. If nothing else, that this has taught me.
What did y'all give up for Lent? Well, Micheal, I know. Well, you're more than welcome to share, or you can keep it a secret. But Fonzie, what did you give up for Lent?
I didn't give up anything. I actually, I am more on the side of the spectrum of Lent of feeding into my magic. So I'm sacrificing. Technically, I'm sacrificing my old self for a new self, I guess. I think what I'm sacrificing is laziness and ill motivation, and I think I'm also sacrificing not working, because there are little bits of I go into like these bouts of like not creating things. And Ryan, you know, because you and I speak every single day, I have been doing things every single day in regards to the podcast, in regards to like my own personal magical business. Like I'm doing new things, and I'm keeping myself busy, and I think feeding into my magic, into my practice, is what I have constantly been doing, kind of just especially focusing it within these last several weeks since Lent started. So yeah, I mean, I don't want to go into saying like you have to give up something for Lent, because there are folks who don't necessarily sacrifice things for Lent. I understand where the kind of the connection and like the correspondence in regards to kind of sacrificing a piece of yourself for Lent, for the idea of Jesus sacrificing himself for the rest, for all of humanity. I understand that. But I also think in the vein of what Jesus wanted in regards to humanity is feeding into ourselves, also kind of nourishing ourselves, and also indulging in ourselves. So I know that, I mean, there are folks who give up sex. I kind of took the opposite side of that and kind of embraced my sexuality within the last couple of months, and kind of been hypersexual, to the point to where I kind of, because there's a lot of shame when it comes to my sexual kind of mindset. So kind of, I guess, sacrificing the shameful mindset that I have about sex is one of the things that I was working on, so there's a lot of things. I it's kind of an amalgamation of a lot of things. So I gave up nothing. I was feeding myself. I was nourishing myself, my spirit, my magic.
Have you ever read the poem about Lent and it's called Fast and Feast?
I have not.
No.
So after the podcast, I'll send it. But there is a poem about Lent, and it's like, like saying, like, we're going to fast from self-criticism, and feast on, like, self-motivation.
Oh, I love that.
And so it's a that really kind of nice dichotomy of, like, the understanding that concept of a fast. Like, a fast doesn't mean that we have to give up necessarily something that we like. It could be something that's rooted in our lives that we wish to change into something positive. So I
Mm,
think that a definite mind shift on the kind of idea of fasting, on the kind of replacing what we're fasting from with something that's more of a positive to help us in our spiritual life and our spiritual growth.
I love
absolutely,
that.
absolutely.
What about you, Ryan? What did you give up?
I same along the lines of you, Fonzie. I didn't necessarily give up anything. It's more so discernment with my usage of recreational drugs, mainly just marijuana and alcohol. Because sometimes I go through these phases of just liking to party a bit more than normal, and it ends up throwing my entire schedule off, especially if I'm like recovering the next day. Or like when I smoke, it always makes me tired when I come down, which keeps me from like doing my nightly prayers or even just doing things that I enjoy, like my skincare, right? So like just being a lot more um finding like the energy of the temperance card, right? Just finding that balance between like, okay, I have the free time to do something. Am I going to do it with am I going to do something that's going to benefit my mind, body, and spirit, or am I going to choose to indulge in one of these substances as not necessarily a coping mechanism per se, but to like fill the free time, right? Like what's going to help me more. And I also started a new medication that I'm not supposed to be drinking, so that's also kind of coerced me more to like abstain from alcohol, even though I did kind of party it up last weekend. But regardless, and then I was trying to pick up praying the rosary at least once a day again, and for the most part I was doing really well. Since I've been up here in Portland for the past week, I have been not so well at praying the rosary, but I did start adopting the Angelus into my practice because I was trying to work more with, or I was trying to introduce myself to Archangel Gabriel and incorporate him into my practice, and him being, the mystery of the announcement of the incarnation of Christ to Mary. He is the angel that's mentioned in the Angelus prayer, and traditionally it was prayed at, and correct me if I'm wrong, Michael, because you may know more historically than I, but I believe it was prayed at 6 a.m, noon, and 6 p.m. I've read sometimes 9 p.m, so 3 times a day. And so I put reminders on my phone, and I'm trying to say the Angelus at least during one of those times, if not all three. One, to focus my attention to prayer, and two, to kind of recognize the presence of Archangel Gabriel, which I haven't asked him for anything yet, more so just still trying to get to know him. So again, adopting like something into my spiritual practice, less so sacrificing anything like that. I told myself I was going to limit social media use, but that hasn't really changed at all. But I'm trying to be more mindful of it for sure. But
Mm.
yeah. Now, Michael,
Well,
do you want to share what?
oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead. No, I was just gonna say that I was going to do social media, but a lot of my work has to deal with social media. So like
Right.
I think like I was trying to like tell myself like don't just like don't doom scroll, because like that's the bad habit,
Right.
But yeah, anyways, yeah, Michael, what if you, I mean, we kikied before this started, so
I'm
like
ready. I'm ready to tell the world
okay.
just what the truth is
Okay.
behind Micheal Therese McQueen. Don't let the Instagram fool you. Not unless you've read between the lines of my Instagram, then you know. And
If you know, then you know.
no, but so I had decided this Lent I was going to give up like all my little naughty apps like Grinder and Sniffies, which are my two main ones that I use, not because of any kind of sexual shame or anything like that, but more in the realm of kind of focusing on healthier and stronger relationships with men in general. That has been rougher than I had anticipated, though, because we just can't keep a good hoe down. Like, um I just think it's like once you turn 32, it's just like the way that you connect with people becomes just a lot more difficult. And just what I found is that
Yes.
finding social situations to like put yourself in where that's not the case is a lot rougher than what we have. So I will go a day without being on the app, but the next day I'm like, well, what am I supposed to do at my lunch break for work? This is like my prime moment. This And so it has been a walk of shame for the last couple of weeks of Lent, of me trying to like balance it out. But I've taken some wisdom from you guys, because maybe I should um really just kind of refocus that energy of not just kind of like not getting rid of it totally, but definitely like kind of monitoring where I go with it and how much time I spend on it, and maybe refocusing that energy elsewhere. Um yeah.
I love that. Here's the thing. I want folks to understand, especially folks who are not um, people of color, male presenting, and gay, or engage in sexual activity with the same sex. Those apps, I don't want to harp too heavily on this, only because I don't think it's that time, but just because Michael, you brought it up, I just want people to understand is that as a person, just speaking from my personal experience as a person of color and a gay man, those apps can be extremely detrimental to your mental health.
Ooh.
And the reason why is because of this. It's a very white, it's a very body shaming, it's a very a lot of things that goes into what is considered favorable or what is considered fuckable. And so there are times where you're going through these apps and you look through someone's profile and you see their preferences, and this is what really
quote unquote
bothers me.
preferences.
Right. This is exactly what bothers me, because they'll put it very blatantly with also no picture of themselves. They won't show their faces on their profiles, right? They'll show like a body shot or whatever, but their faces won't be, or it'll be blank. It'd be totally black, right? But their profile itself is something along the lines of no femmes, no fats, no blacks, no Asians, no... And then at the end, sorry, they're just my preferences. It is disgusting. It is disgusting, and it exists, especially here in LA where I live. It is disgusting, and it is rampant. Okay, the racism, the body shaming, all of it. Because apparently, the only thing that's really desirable are white, super like fit, masculine, cisgender men. And it is absolutely devastating to a man's, or just to anyone who doesn't fit that criteria. It is devastating to our mental health.
Absolutely. I mean, like back in the day before I was confident in my body dysmorphia was a lot worse. Like, you know, looking at me, it looks like I might be super fit under my clothes, but I'm pretty much just like have like average slim type body. I love my body. I'm confident in my body. I know I'm sexy. But like you said, Fonzie, most of the guys on those apps are just toxic. And like, if you don't have a fucking six pack, they think you're fat. And I remember like guys would see my face and think I'm cute, hit me up, we'd exchange pics. But the moment I would show them my body, they'd be like, ooh, you know what? Actually, you're not my type. Sorry. I'm just like, okay. And back in those days, again, like I wasn't confident in my body. Horrible body dysmorphia. That shit was detrimental to my mental health. It was horrible. Just, yeah, disgusting.
And then on the other side of that, there are folks who are like, ooh, because I don't have the greatest body in the world, like, or, you know, whatever you consider the greatest body in the world. I don't have the most fit body in the world. So like there are these chubby chasers, like what they call themselves, and they're like, are you fetishizing the fact that like it's so? And then also there'll be like white dudes who'll be like, ooh, I like Asians I like a lot. I was like, are you fetishizing the fact that I'm Asian? Like that, like it's like the other side of the spectrum. You know what I mean? Where it's just like, why are people so insane?
Right.
It's true. There's no middle ground. And I think the difference here, it's very interesting because here in New Jersey and Philadelphia, what I'm finding is the exact opposite. Now, it has changed on this side of the coast that it's like, I'm not femme enough. And so it's like too masculine. And I was just like, well, wait, what the fuck do you want then? Like, you know, like I'm very like, you know, it's like, if you know, it's like I'm too tall, I'm too masculine, and I'm too black. Like, you know, like those are the three big ones. It's like I'm too tall, too masculine, or too black, or I'm not black enough. Like, you know, I'm not the stereotypical hood nigga. And so like it's like, and so I'm like soft. And so And so it's just like I don't understand what you
Awful.
people want from me. It's just like I'm confused. Like, and so that is here in New Jersey, Philadelphia,
Oh my
of the
god.
craziness that goes on the apps.
Wild. Fucking
Wild.
wild. But anyways, that's just a little introduction into what it's like to be a a gay male presenting person on these apps. It's not
Right.
easy.
Right.
Just to get a little bit of dick. Like, come on.
But a great time to put all these motherfuckers in a jar would be during Holy Week. And so let's dive into
Right.
Holy Week.
Yes, baby. Okay, so let's go into Holy Week, because Holy Week is arguably the most important time of the year in regards to everyone who identifies as some sort of Christian, right? So, Michael, because you are our guest, can you kind of tell folks what Holy Week is, what the days are, what they represent, et cetera, et cetera? Like, just go into it. Let them just run with it.
So Holy Week is the week before Easter, and Holy Week starts on Palm Sunday. And so what the Holy Week really represents is the reenactment of Jesus's passion and his death, and the events that lead up to that. So we begin Holy Week with the celebration of Palm Sunday, which is Jesus's triumphal entrance into Jerusalem. And in the liturgy of Palm Sunday, we have a short reenactment of the Passion within the Palm Sunday liturgy. And if you're really lucky and you're kind of like one of those Latin Mass people, you actually have a whole separate liturgy for both of those two instances of the entrance into Jerusalem and the Passion. So there's that. Holy Week then continues. We have what's called Spy Wednesday, which is the day that supposedly Judas betrays Jesus. And then after Spy Wednesday, we go into what's considered the most sacred 3 days out of the Christian calendar, which is the Easter Triduum that consists of Holy Thursday, Good Friday, and Holy Saturday. Good Thursday, which is the remembrance of the Lord's Supper, which is the first Eucharistic feast of the liturgical year, representing the institution of the Eucharist. Next, we have Good Friday, which commemorates Christ's passion and death. And then we have Holy Saturday, which is a double feast because Holy Saturday represents Jesus's entrance into the tomb, Jesus's entrance into the underworld. But at sundown on Holy Saturday, we also celebrate the first instance of the resurrection at the Easter Vigil on Holy Saturday. So technically, Easter starts the evening of Holy Saturday. And so that is Holy Week in a nutshell.
Michael, when you mentioned Jesus' passion, for those who may not be Christian or coming back to Christianity, who may be unfamiliar with that term, could you elaborate a little bit about that? Because passion almost sounds like, when we think passion, we think like a flaming love, which I guess this does embody in Christ's passion for dying for us. But could you just elaborate a bit on what Christ's passion exactly is?
So when we talk about passion, and I think in our modern context of passion, I think that we miss a lot of the way that we use the word, because passio from the Latin root means to suffer. So when we do something passionately, it means that we suffer for it. So when we say that we love passionately, it means that there's kind of this element of suffering with it. When we do something with passion, it's like, we suffer for it. So the passion in this context, when we talk about the passion of Christ, we are talking about his suffering specifically within that context.
And that kind of goes into the idea of the passionate love that Christ had in going through this week and the things that he had to endure to for the sake of the love that he has for humanity.
So I'm really curious, Michael, if you could elaborate on the different traditions, whichever ones you have on mind, whether it's one you practice or just historical knowledge of traditions, excuse me, of traditions that do certain magics during Holy Week. Like, are there certain days that are kind of prioritized or designated for certain magics to be done? I mean, I know we've touched on kind of like Good Friday and Holy Saturday, since like Jesus is like kind of gone, you get like a free pass to do baneful workings, or so they say. So could you elaborate a bit more on how a folk practitioner can utilize the magic of Holy Week in their practice?
It's Holy Week being it's packed full. Like it's one of those kind of celebrations that's packed full of lots of symbolism. One of the things that I like to do personally is to kind of start the preparation for Easter with Palm Sunday. And so one of the traditions that I like to do is really start the cleansing. Start cleansing the house, start purifying things on Palm Sunday, um, for that Easter date. And one of the things that you can do, which is actually a Maltese tradition, is actually burning the palms that you get on Palm Sunday as kind of a fumigant
Mm.
for your house cleansings. And so that's one way of going about doing that house cleansing also. For me, a lot of the magical work that I do for Holy Week comes from following a lot of the liturgical tradition. Traditionally, a week before Holy Week, there's a reading the Sunday before Holy Week begins, where it says that Christ hides himself. They will go to arrest him, and Christ hides himself. And so there's a tradition within the church that we cover all the statues, we cover the crucifix, and that's something that I do into my own home. So, for granted, a lot of my magical work stops for that week. In preparation, also because it's this kind of understanding that we don't necessarily during this time have access to these things because Christ is about to go through this suffering. So, we cover all the images of the saints, we cover the crucifix, and there's that time of preparation in that.
Okay, and I know you mentioned, so there's Palm Sunday, Holy Thursday, and Holy Saturday, right?
Holy Thursday and
And then
Holy
Good
Saturday.
Friday. And so aside from those days, that Monday through Wednesday, I suppose, are those designated for anything in particular, or is it more so just those other days that we mentioned?
I think it's much more focused on the Triduum.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of the magic and a lot of the symbolism, and really the energy that you can work within that week is really compacted outside of Palm Sunday, is really compacted into those 3 days. In the on Holy Thursday, there's that whole kind of idea of like the kitchen magic, being able to kind of cook a meal, bring the family together, and it really kind of bring kind of that Eucharist to the table. And then, as we talked about on Good Friday, it's really that day that we kind of get that free pass because in the Italian tradition, we talk about God turns his head on Good Friday because it's kind of like Jesus is on the cross, has died and has expired, has offered the sacrifice. But in that instance, it's also kind of like God gets a free pass. We can talk about Saint Dismas also in this, Dismas the good thief, who is kind of the saint of Good Friday of excuse me of Jesus forgives Dismas. And so there's this kind of overwhelming tradition of kind of, it doesn't matter what you do on Good Friday, God will forgive it on Good Friday, or God will overlook it on Good Friday. And then on the Easter Vigil, we have this kind of celebration of the light. So there's a lot of things about lighting candles, doing candle work on Holy Saturday. In the Italian tradition, we have a tradition of lighting the solar light, which is really happens on Easter morning, where you go outside with a magnifying glass and you set a fire, and that's the fire that you would use to light the rest of your candles for the rest of the year, which isn't very
Ooh.
practical, but but there is that tradition. And so
I read about a tradition that is done on Wednesday, on Holy Wednesday, called the Tenebrae, which after I read it, I want to do it because it sounds like an amazing service. And it looks like it's traditionally a Latin service, so any sort of like traditional Latin maybe mass would maybe do this on Holy Wednesday. But Holy Wednesday, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm just going to read off what this article that I'm reading. It says Holy Week continues in many Christian traditions on Holy Wednesday, known as Spy Wednesday, which you mentioned before. Holy Wednesday is often marked with the service of Tenebrae, with the hearing of appropriate psalms and other readings, while candles are gradually extinguished, creating the sense of growing darkness. The darkness symbolizes the abandonment of Jesus by his disciples and anticipates the anguish and tragedy of Good Friday later on in Holy Week. So it's like this service where you're supposed to be doing it in this dark room with candles. I think I understand it to be 8 candles and 8 prayers, 8 passages. You read each passage, and after each passage, you extinguish a candle. And at the end of it, the only candle that is lit is the light, or the candle of Christ, which you continue to burn. And that candle is supposed to burn for the remaining 3 days into Holy Saturday. That's how I understand it.
So I'm just going to correct you on the last point, because the Paschal candle is actually extinguished during Lent, and so a new Paschal candle is lit on the Easter Vigil, and so the whole kind of understanding of Tenebrae is, again, like the article says, is that it's this growing darkness, that the patches are red and the candles are extinguished, to really kind of reflect that darkness that's coming for Good Friday, and of course the abandonment of the apostles. But the whole kind of point of the Easter Vigil is this kind of understanding of the new light. We light the new fire, we bless the new Paschal candle, and for most of the liturgy of Holy Saturday, the Paschal candle is the physical representation of Christ. It's not the Eucharist until the Mass is celebrated later. So you have people genuflecting to the candle. You'll have people kissing the candle. So there's this whole kind of the extinguishing of the light, and then that leads to the Easter Vigil, where we have the new light.
Oh, I love that.
I don't think I've ever been to an Easter Vigil service.
Me neither.
It is powerful shit. Like, like I tell people, if there's one liturgy that you go to out of the year, you at least have to see the Easter Vigil at least once.
Okay, definitely going to make an effort to go this year. I think I'm actually going to be in Portland again when it happens, but I definitely would like to try to go for sure. Yeah, my family was always the type. My family is what my older brother, who's a pretty devout Catholic, refers to as C&E Catholics. They only go to Mass during Christmas and Easter. But I think I went to Mass more last year than my family has throughout the last 10 years, which is hilarious. But definitely want to try to go to the Easter Vigil this year for sure.
And also, with that said, I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with being a C&E Christian, because I feel like there's a lot of power in building your own church at home. So, but at the same time, we've spoken about, in the past about the power of going to a Mass. So if you could, go to a Mass. But at the same time, it's like, it's not all the time necessary. But I think Holy Week is a really wonderful time to go to Mass, only because of, one, the power that kind of, the magic and the power that kind of accumulates in that week in a church is pretty amazing, I would imagine. So,
and even with that, just on that note, the liturgies of the Triduum are just one continuous liturgy. The liturgy of Holy Thursday, actually, it begins with the Mass of the Lord's Supper, which is the last Mass that will be celebrated into the Easter Vigil. So after Jesus is taken out of the tabernacle and the Blessed Sacrament is removed from the church, there's no blessing, final blessing after that Mass, because then that liturgy is supposed to just continue into the liturgy of Good Friday, the liturgy of the Passion of Christ's death, and that liturgy doesn't end with a final blessing. And so then the liturgy of the Easter Vigil just begins. There's no blessing in the beginning, and it just continues through to the end of the mass. So it's that power of just that one continuous liturgy over 3 days of stretched out.
Mm, that's beautiful.
That is beautiful. Just so folks know, and you folks know, this is actually going to be posted. This episode is going to be posted early enough for folks to actually use this episode and its information to prepare for Holy Week if you decide to do magic on Holy Week. So if like what Michael mentioned, Palm Sunday is a really wonderful time to start kind of doing the prep and kind of cleansing and getting yourself ready for Easter, which happens the Sunday after. You know, and then kind of spending, I mean, I would say, like, you know, maybe spending time on Monday and Tuesday kind of in contemplation and meditation and in prayer. And then also, you know, knowing what each day kind of represents and kind of seeing how your personal practice aligns with that, and then doing something that kind of corresponds well with what happened that day, and then moving forward into Easter to kind of, you know, consecrate your whole experience is, I think, is a wonderful time to do something really magical and kind of set yourself up for the rest of the year, you know. So you know, there's a lot of things that you can possibly do. Like, for example, Michael, I have actually approached the two of you maybe like a month ago about how I see Holy Week and how I see the Easter time, and how I actually see, because I obviously I associate it heavily with Our Lady of Sorrows, who I'm cultivating a relation, or who Ryan and I synchronistic, I don't know how this happened, but we started cultivating this relationship with Our Lady of Sorrows at the same time. I think our cycles are just syncing, Ryan, because we spend so much time with each other, you know. So I think we're just so synced, you know what I mean? But now, because I've kind of started cultivating this relationship, I started to see Easter as this time to do kind of darker magic, kind of to do darker left-handed, kind of vengeful, baneful magic. And I know I approached you, Michael. We spoke briefly, you know, through DMs and stuff, but your insight on what I was saying was wonderful. Do you mind kind of telling folks how you feel about that idea of doing kind of darker sided magic during Holy Week?
I think it's the perfect time to do darker sided magic is during the Holy Week, especially as we contemplate on kind of Good Friday. In the Italian tradition, as I stated before, like, you know, Good Friday is the day that you would do more baneful work and more baneful magic. But I think just to point out where you pointed, Fonzie, with that work with Our Lady of Sorrows, like, you know, like, I think that when we look at Our Lady of Sorrows, I think we see very much in Our Lady those who have been done wrong, like, you know, those who injustice has been done to, because who has had more of an injustice done than Our Lady, whose son is put to death basically on trumped up charges. Like, you know, like,
Right.
this is the quintessential of when we think about social justice work and those who have been wronged by patriarchy and by the system and by
Absolutely.
society at whole. And so I think that when we take that perspective of Our Lady of Sorrow as the one that has the injustice done to them, you know, it's kind of, how do we bring balance back to that injustice? And that's how I look at baneful work. In general, it's not just about, like, you know, the get back, like, you know, it's not about who can get the hardest punch. And I think for our listeners, and I think, and this isn't me saying, like, you know, how you should do your craft, but I think that we need to be more mindful when it comes to baneful work and it comes to curse work, that this is about bringing back balance. Like, you know, this is about bringing back a sense of justice to our world, and it's not necessarily about who can hit harder.
Yeah, I don't think it's and when I say like baneful work, I don't think it's like in a general sense is like being baneful or hexing for the sake of doing it. I don't think that's fair. I mean, do it if you should, if you feel like you should, but at the same time, it's like, I think it's like, which, Ryan, you know this way better than I do. In the sorrowful mysteries, which one is associated? The spiritual fruit of it is kind of abandoning your old self. Which one is that?
Abandoning well, the first one's associated. Are you driving the book?
Am I? Where the fuck is my book?
Because the first mystery, spiritual fruit is submission to God's will, and then control over body and self, and then control over thoughts and emotions, and then perseverance, and then forgiveness. So not really necessarily a killing of one's old self, but I would say that either like the control over your physical body. So the second and third mysteries, I would say, control over your emotions and control over your physical nature could fall.
Oh, I think what I'm talking about is, hang on. Sorry.
You're Gucci.
Oh God, I'm gonna forget my point after I figure this out. Oh, here it is. Oh, dying. Okay, no. Fonzie, you're such a dummy. The crucifixion. Dying to self and forgiveness of others' trespasses. So what I'm planning, or what I'm trying to associate, like in regards to darker magic, is the banishment of things and parts of yourself that are keeping you from forgiving yourself and forgiving others around you. So when I say banishment, I mean doing banishing work to banish the old part of yourself that is hindering your growth in your practice or hindering your growth as a person. So, and that also includes people. So there are folks, if you're hyper aware of the folks that are around you, there are still folks who are kind of latching themselves onto me that I've had long relationships with, that I plan to do some banishing work in regards to kind of easing their influence on my life. So that's kind of what I'm talking about, kind of banishing the negative, ugly, yucky parts that kind of hinder my growth magically. And sometimes, yeah, it is a shut up spell. Sometimes it is kind of like a, shut up gossip spell. Sometimes you do have to sew a cow's tongue to shut someone up, to keep yourself, to alleviate what's ever hindering you,
Right. Yeah.
I think where I look at that more as shadow work, and I think for me that's when we talk about kind of like baneful magic and what's always been taught to me from more the Italian side, it was more like who you can fuck over, and that was
right.
and so that's where I understand that tradition from. But I definitely see where you're coming from more of kind of the shadow work element. And like I think where we can look into Holy Week at that, it's like we're dealing with the underworld, which I think is a part of the Holy Week mystery that tends to get overlooked, especially within kind of the modern context of Holy Week. It's like, we concentrate on the passion and the death, and then we can't concentrate on Easter, but we also forget that Christ had to descend into hell, had to kind of descend into the place of the dead, had to descend into the place, the baneful place, what is hindering the growth, and really free those people who have been waiting for salvation from the realms of hell. And so that's where I kind of see that aspect of it.
And is Easter Day considered part of Holy Week, or is it specifically from Palm Sunday to Holy Saturday?
So Holy Week is considered Palm Sunday to Holy Saturday. Easter Sunday begins what we called Eastertide, because the celebration of Easter continues on until the Feast of Pentecost.
Got it. Is there any particular magic you would recommend focusing on like the actual day of Easter? I know our topic is focusing on Holy Week, but just since this is going to be also released around, soon to be Easter time.
Right. So sex magic from Holy Saturday into Easter Sunday. I think that's a beautiful time to really kind of work sexual energy, because in the Easter liturgy and in the Easter symbology, we have this beautiful kind of imagery of rebirth. It's like kind of, what are we birthing into existence? What are we fertilizing to be born for the spring, which is kind of what we do in kind of our Lenten practices. What are we kind of bringing into birth? What are we bringing into renewal? And so I think having kind of a sexual, kind of erotic component to the Easter Day celebrations, that's a perfect time to kind of look more into kind of the erotic undertones of the feast itself, because the first reading of the Easter season, because there's 3 masses for Easter. There's the mass in the morning, there's the mass during the day, and then there's the mass at noon, that focus on different elements of the Easter story. And the first Easter story that's told on the mass at sunrise is the meeting of Jesus with Mary Magdalene. So we have kind of that divine masculine and that divine feminine coming together. And if we kind of take that back to the ancient stories, the divine feminine resurrects the divine masculine through a sexual act, which is implied in the story, but it's not really there in the gospel story. But it is that kind of that coming together of the divine masculine and the divine feminine.
The coming together. Come on. Can we not? We're not going to breeze over the
coming
together.
Right? I mean, I'm gonna be in Portland that week with my man, so I'm gonna definitely be celebrating with sex magic.
I was about to ask you. I was like, "Where's Ryan gonna be for Holy Week?" I hope.
Yeah, I'm gonna be making it an unholy week. Shit.
Hey. Well, oh my God, did you see that? Just 2 hands at the same time.
That's what I was doing. Just the one.
Hey. But listen, it's so interesting because like what Micheal just said is very transgressive, and it's pretty pagan. So it's a very pagan idea to do some sort of sex magic during a holy day, during a very, very holy day. Is a very transgressive and kind of antithetical to what we talk about, or what traditional Christians teach, right? And it goes into that whole idea of we're gonna gatekeep what the magic that we don't want to keep. We want to make sure that you stay pure. And this idea of purity also it robs you of the potential magic. And sex magic, folks, is so incredibly powerful.
So powerful.
The amount of energy that you accumulate while you're having sex is something that you should utilize, because it is so powerful and it's very distinct. It's something that you cannot access all the time, right? That whole idea of the sexual power, the sexual magic, is something that you can't just access when you're at work. I mean, unless you're doing sex work. But like what I'm saying is, it's like if you're doing like it's kind of like a generic 9-to-5 corporate job, it's not something that you can access at work. It's something that you have to actually put yourself in a place to do it. So utilizing that magic, that power that that your body can actually produce naturally during a holy day to help grant your will in some way is awesome. And also using sex magic in the name of Christ is just so heretical, and it's so juicy, and I love it so much. You know what I mean?
Oh fuck yeah!
It's interesting because during the liturgy of Holy Saturday, when the font for baptism is blessed, and I know all my Wiccan friends are gonna have have that moment of kind of like, yes, like, we have within the liturgy where the paschal candle, which is of course the phallic symbol, is plunged into the baptismal font 3 times. So we have kind of that symbolic
Yeah.
sexual magical act we built into the liturgy itself, because the paschal candle is said even in the liturgy and the prayer itself to make the water regenerative. Like, that whole idea of kind of seeding the womb or fertilizing the womb is right there, built within the Easter Vigil liturgy itself. So I don't see why you wouldn't take the symbolic act and then use it for your own magical practice.
I would also like to comment and I would like to hear your thoughts on this, only because it just popped into my head in regards to a sexual act at church. There are aspects of the Eucharist that I find extremely erotic. And
Oh,
let me tell. Oh, go ahead.
the whole mass is just a divine sex act. And so that is my story. I'm sticking to it.
You're gonna die on that hill.
I'm gonna die on that hill, and I can back it up with theology. And so,
Yeah.
Please do.
but the Eucharist itself, the Mass, it's a divine sex act in and of itself. Because what is the Eucharist? From the earliest days, the Eucharist is just a divine wedding. It is a wedding to Jesus. Like, when you go to Mass, you get married to Jesus mystically. Like, and then how do you consummate that marriage? Like, you go to communion. Like, it's like you have this whole kind of theological understanding that when Jesus is on the cross, which again goes back to Good Friday to tie in, like, the Jesus is consummating his marriage to the church. Even to the point that the French call orgasm the little death, and they're making direct reference to Jesus on the cross. And so with that, yeah.
Oh.
And so
Wow.
and so, like, like there's kind of this orgasmic sense of energy that happens during Christ's passion and death, because he's making love to the church within that instance. And the Mass is just a representation of that love making of Christ with his church on the altar. And so the Eucharist itself is a divine penetration of the mortal soul. We're all we're all the brides of Christ. Like, like, and I say this all the time: if you are baptized, you are a bride of Christ, male or female. And like, you go to communion, like, Christ is basically having his way with you. And that's what it is.
I really wish. Okay, I'm going to take this time to do a shameless plug of the Patreon, because I need the world to watch this episode and look at Ryan's face when Michael said penetration, Christ, and church. Because it's so thirsty. It's so thirsty. But it's the only reason why I associate the idea of Eucharist and consuming the body of Christ as a sexual, like you said, a divine sexual act, is when you are in a sexual act with your significant consenting other. It's the same idea where you're consuming each other. You are consuming each other's bodies, and you are also offering each other's bodies, right? Which is what Eucharist is, right? It's the offering of Christ's body, and then also when you're in a sexual act, it's the same thing. You're consuming and offering each other's bodies, right? And at the same time, you're consuming and, figuratively speaking, I hope, you are also offering and consuming each other's blood in the way where you are, because the blood is the life force. The blood is the essence of the body, right? It's what keeps us alive. So the idea of the Eucharist and consuming the body of Christ and the blood of Christ and associating that with a sexual act is actually parallel to each other, right? So being able to use your sex and the magic that you produce while you're having sex into your magical practice is so incredibly powerful and immensely divine divine, because the orgasm is divine.
Yes.
I never thought about that. See, I suck at sex magic because when I'm in the moment, all I'm focusing on is busting a nut, and it's like I bust the nut without like focusing on the magical intention. I'm like, well, there goes my chance at sex magic.
Well, I think that's one way of looking at sex magic, because so a shameless plug to my mentor and teacher Gian Michael Salvato of the Inner Alchemy Academy. Um we talk about sex magic, and the thing is that we don't have to be fully cognizant of where that energy is going. Like, even if we set the intention before, like, we get to that
Okay.
point, we can set that intention before, but like we don't have to be like actively thinking about what it is that we're manifesting, what it is that we want to kind of get out of that ritual work. It's like we can set that intention an hour before, or like even right before when we're getting into it, but like we don't have to be constantly kind of fixated on like what that is to like make that energy work.
Right.
Well, I would argue, I would even argue that you could do it afterwards
Mhm.
into if you collect your secretions. Fuck, I don't want to be politically
Sexual
correct.
fluids.
If you collect your cum, if you collect your cum, what do you think is in the cum? It's your magic. So you can, I mean, I would say that your sexual fluids has the magic in it, and you can, you can put your intention into that and then use the fluids in your magic. So
Interesting.
argue
Okay.
that's something that you got. I mean, holding like a vial is kind of cool. Like, just getting ready to just make sure it goes
Girl,
on.
I just have the candle ready and I just slap that shit off my body and just keep it moving. And it's
I
like, and
love
we're just
that.
gonna keep it going. Like,
Yes.
We got work to do.
we got work to do.
I just like anointing candles with cum just sounds fucking incredible.
Well, since we're on the subject, I'm gonna dig into some of my personal gnosis that Mary Magdalene gave me a sex magic ritual within the past week, where it's like she's like, and I need you to get to fuck the candle. She's like, like get the penis candle, and she's like, fuck the candle. And I was like, all right. And so like like that is another way of going about it. And so
Interesting. Okay, we would like to preface, well, not any, because we were saying this, I'm saying this after. Please be careful what you put in your body. Okay, so like,
please put a condom on it. Please do not
put a condom on it.
Put a condom on it.
Do not put paraffin in your orifices, please.
In your pussy. No paraffin in the pussy.
No. That's not what I'm advocating here. So,
but that's an interesting idea. I love that gnosis. It's food for thought. But anyways, we're talking about doing sex magic during Holy Week.
it's better for Mary Magdalene, and here she is.
I mean, cultivating a relationship with Mary Magdalene sounds like a great idea during Holy Week. Do you have any advice for someone who maybe would be interested in doing that, and how they would go about doing so?
I think with Mary Magdalene, I think this is, and even with Mary, so I have this image in my head and in my devotional life where I look at the three people at the cross as being the first three mystical brides of Christ. And so you have John, who represents kind of the masculine and the trans masculine. You have Mary Magdalene, who is who represents kind of the more feminine aspect of the bride, and then you have Mary, who kind of doubles as kind of this mother bride. I know this is about to get really weird, but it's just like, they all kind of enter into kind of this erotic relationship with Jesus on the cross as he's going through this passion and through this suffering. There's kind of this mystical union between the three of them. So I think it's really about, during Holy Week, it's really kind of meditating and connecting with Mary Magdalene as the bride, as Mary Magdalene as the mystical bride. And how do we enter into that mystical spousalship with the Christ through her during this time. And that's how I see Mary Magdalene in this week, as kind of that mystical spouse of Christ. And how do we enter into that mystical spousalhood with Christ during this week?
I've never worked much with Mary Magdalene at all, really, but she's definitely on my list of saints to kind of reach out to. But just from what I've learned from you, Michael, too, like I definitely feel like I don't really work with like planetary spirits or like Venus or anything like that. But I feel like if I were to work with something Venusian, like Mary Magdalene would be the way to go. Just the way you've described her as someone who's like very sexually empowering, and even after describing that ritual she's provided to you, like I feel like she's the perfect segue into working with those Venusian and sexual energies. And I can't wait for when I do dive into that with her for sure.
And I just want to kind of point out there that John, for those who can't connect to Mary Magdalene in that way, I think John is an excellent John the Beloved, who had the audacity, on the Last Supper to to lay his head on Jesus's breast. And it's like, you can't tell me that there wasn't more going on there. Like Jesus had it for everybody. Like Jesus just one day we're gonna get there, and it was like Jesus had the men, he had the women, he had it going on from everybody. And so I think that there is this aspect of John also that has this very even though the church likes to paint him as the only virgin apostle, like I think that there is something extremely homoerotic with John also, and kind of this divine kind of lover archetype within the person of John the Beloved. So I think he's an interesting figure to tap into also during this time.
You know what's really great? I love that we're giving more resources to folks to work with different people who isn't Jesus during
Yes.
Holy Week. I know that Holy Week and Easter is centered around what happened to Christ, but I know that there are a lot of folks who want to engage and participate in Holy Week, but still do not feel comfortable working with Jesus because of their religious trauma. So knowing that you don't necessarily have to, I think it's important to recognize what happened. I don't think it's fair to ignore the fact that it happened, and these things did happen, and that there's a reason why folks celebrate it, and it's okay to recognize it, but not necessarily work directly with Jesus if you don't feel comfortable doing so. And having, obviously someone who would be so powerful to work with, like I said, is Our Lady of Sorrows, and that's like, if there's anyone you are gonna work with, like, work with her. She's the culmination of everything that happened. It also happened with her. She experienced the same events, but in a different way. And it's important to recognize that the power that the experience that Mary had that week to kind of move towards what happened to her son is very powerful things to work with. So
something that just came to mind, and I just want to call quick attention to it, is an Eastern icon of Jesus after he's been scourged at the pillar, and the icon is called Christ the Bridegroom, and it shows Jesus within the purple cloak and within the purple garment. His hands are tied, but again, it has that connotation of the bridegroom again, just kind of calling back kind of that sexual and erotic mystery that's going on also. And so that just came to mind.
I want to look that icon up real quick.
I'm looking it up right now. I'm looking it up too. Oh my god, this is what you were just talking about. This one. Is that what you're talking about, how he laid his head on his breast?
So that's that one. Yes, that's
Okay.
that one.
And then I'm seeing this one, Christ the Bridegroom.
That's the one I'm talking about, yeah.
Oh, how beautiful.
Could you go in any in depth of what this and if anyone just kind of it's a really simple Google search of this icon of Christ in this purple, I want to say sheet or shroud or something. Can you go into the the symbology of, or the meaning behind what this actually is?
Sure. So what's going on in this image? So this is an icon of Jesus right after the scourging. So this is um right after the Romans have beaten him and have scourged him at the pillar. And so after his beating, Jesus is mocked. So this here, so the soldiers give him the crown of thorns, but they also give him the purple cloak, because the purple cloak is a symbol of what you call it, of kingship. It's a symbol of kingship. So in this, he's in the purple cloak. He's holding the reed as the scepter, and then he's also has the crown of thorns on this. But the image is that through this suffering, this is kind of Christ's nuptials to the church. Like through this kind of mockery and this suffering, this is Christ being prepared for his wedding feast. This is Christ being prepared to go marry his bride. Bride being the church. And even the individual soul, because I think, again, when we talk about the church, we have to remember that the church is also every baptized individual. Like, like the baptized individual is the church. The baptized individual is the bride of Christ. So we could really say, by looking at this icon, that Christ is being prepared to be married to each of us.
How interesting. Because I know you've described your personal relationship, Michael, with Jesus as being a very erotic one. And I personally, like, which is going to sound crazy, I'm so intimate in a relationship with my devotion to Mary and Guadalupe, but like, it's like I rarely ever work with like Jesus directly or pray to Jesus directly. It's always through a different source, like whether it's praying to Jesus or God through the saints, through the angels, through Mary. Would you be okay sharing a bit about your like kind of more erotic relationship with Christ, to kind of give people an example of how in this heretical practice of ours as folk practitioners, like an erotic relationship is possible and how that may look?
I think that we, in our conversation, we've had the perfect setup. And I think I have to give a little bit of background of how I came to that relationship with Jesus. And the first was that I had a teacher in high school who said, the Eucharist is the most intimate experience that you'll ever have. It's more intimate than sex. And so in like my young teenage mind, that's something that really resonated with me and something that I really took to heart. The second was when I was converting to Catholicism. We had a woman who came to speak to us, who was a charismatic Catholic, and she said, even though I'm married, I consider myself a bride of Christ. And that's something that also really rooted itself into my spirituality and into my personal mystical practice, is really as seeing Jesus as the divine bridegroom, as the spouse, as kind of a spousal figure. And like, within that mystery of being married, like, there is that sexual intimacy. So it's like, Christ is the divine lover. Like, Christ comes to us in that very kind of intimate way. Like, Christ knows us at the base of our being, and still seeks to union with that being, that sense of being at that center of the being, with all its flaws and all its defects. Like, Christ wants to become one with that, and Christ wants to bring that more into his image and likeness. And I think when we get down to it, kind of that erotic relationship, as Fonzie said, like in the Eucharist, it's that giving of the body, it's that giving of the soul, it's that giving of that body and blood to each other. Like, not only does Christ feed us, like, we also feed Christ with ourselves. And so there is that for me, like, like when I'm working sex magic, like, yeah, like I've had fantasies of having sex with Jesus. Like, like this is what's going to get me excommunicated. I hope y'all know this. Like, this is the letters being written as we speak. Like,
You're about to hear knock at your door from a bishop.
Yeah, it's like, I heard, like,
I heard what you said. Yeah.
But even just kind of like, even at mass, like, when I go and receive communion, like, like a lot of my meditation and my imagery is a sexual nature. Like, you know, it is of being held, it is of being kissed and caressed, it is you know, to use the unpolitically correct terms, is like getting fucked, like, you know. But it's in that complete kind of self-giving way, as I give myself, you give yourself to me, I give myself to you.
Yeah, an image popped into my head when we were talking about excuse me, an image popped into my head when we were talking about kind of like the sensuality and erotica of the nature of Mass, because there's a specific parish in San Francisco that I was going to for a hot minute, because it's one of the few places that has 24/7 Eucharistic adoration. But when I go to Mass there, you know, some places allow you, like, they'll usually have you come last in the line of people to receive communion if you want the priest to place it in your mouth. But this specific parish, like, they have these kneeling cushions at the altar, and you have no choice but to kneel on it and let the priest place the Eucharist in your mouth. And, like, I guess just reflecting on seeing how the Mass is an erotic ritual, like, I never considered it that way, but now I'm looking back at it, I'm like, ooh, like, you're literally having, you know, a priest who is acting in persona Christi, like as Christ in person, place the body of Christ in your mouth. And that just in and of itself is intimate and makes my nipples a little hard.
You slag.
You're not wrong.
No, I really, really like the idea of sex, and Holy Week has been floating around in my brain, and I've been trying to kind of associate sex magic and Holy Week. Now, this conversation is so important to me, and I'm definitely going to be listening to this episode again because I need to know what I'm doing on Saturday. And I think I'm going to fuck someone.
And if you can't,
I know
you got a candle. I mean,
right. But also, Ryan, not everyone has someone on, you know, just there at our disposal. We have to work a little bit harder.
It's a single bitches.
Okay, mind you, this is a long. What were you saying, Michael?
I said the single bitches.
Right.
Gotta break our Lent.
Right.
First of all, this is a long distance relationship. I wasn't even planning it specifically to be the Easter Triduum when I was going to be back here. So you know what? I don't always have access to this dick. Okay.
Yes, but you are though. You do though. So like, you're gonna be there.
You can make plans.
My God, I'm just gonna hear about like Ryan like whipping his boyfriend with like palms or something.
He's like, Ryan, I don't get it. I'm like, we're reenacting the scourge. Just get into it. Come on.
Right.
If you do that, please film it and please send it to me so I can have commentary.
Yeah, just it's for educational purposes only.
Catch it on my unholy fans.
Yes.
Work. Oh my God! If you do end up having one of those accounts, please call it that because that's amazing. That is amazing. Oh my God! Yeah, don't give those out for free.
Oh God, never.
I even tell folks. There was this one post. I don't remember who it was. It was probably either Austin or somebody who posted like just a picture of like their table with their like, you know, whatever they were doing, which is magic. But there was like a little piece of their foot in it. I was like, you're posting this for free, girl? Why are you posting this for free? Oh man, this is money somewhere else.
Right. People pay for that.
Anyways, but yeah, people pay for that. But yes, I like how it's kind of now I'm conceptualizing the idea of sex and Holy Week because it is something that I am interested in incorporating into my practice, and I literally have this outline of what I want to do that entire week, and Saturday sounds like it's gonna be a lot of fun.
I might go on Fonzie's Holy Week plans. I'm gonna go to the Easter Vigil, and then I'm just gonna ride the wave. Like keep it going.
That would be an incredible thing to like have like a holy Saturday orgy.
Oh,
I was thinking the exact same thing.
That would be so cool.
Maybe we should organize this for next year. I think now that we've said it, I think it needs to happen.
I don't know. I know for sure there's a lot of bathhouses here in LA. I know there's a lot of bathhouses in
San Francisco.
For sure.
Steamworks.
We have one. We have well no, we have one. We have two in Philly, and one is like it's so bad. It's like the hood, and then it like makes the other one look like the Ritz Carlton.
We had one here called Roman Holiday. And I don't want to associate myself with this place because it was awful. It was so bad. It always smelled like chlorine and poppers. And and you know, it's strange because chlorine and poppers smell the same, so it kind of just smelled like poppers. So but it was dank. It was like the walls were falling apart, and usually those places are always like the best places, like those grimy places. I'm like, I'm getting into something so different, but like I just like the idea of bathhouse because I used to go I used to go to bathhouses a lot. Like a lot. They were so much fun to go to. But this particular place closed down during the pandemic. Thank goodness. But like the clientele there were very predatory, very predatory. So that place always gave me a
Well, with a name
heebie-jeebies.
like Roman Holiday, I wouldn't expect it to be anything but predatory.
Right.
There was literally a movie poster. That's with Audrey Hepburn, right? Roman Holiday.
Yes.
Yeah. There is, when you walk in, there is a poster of Audrey Hepburn in Roman Holiday, and I was like,
I
this
love
is
it.
weird.
But it's so gay that
It's so gay.
So gay.
It's as stereotypical gay as, and then the pool, like the room where the pool is, it like they painted this like facade that looks like you're looking at like the landscape of Rome. It's so corny. It's so gay. It is so gay. I would have loved it if the clientele weren't so yucky.
But it sounds like a perfect place to have our Holy Saturday orgy.
Absolutely.
God, Fonzie, our audience count after this episode is just like poop.
Let's go.
They're like, where did this go? They're like, where did this took a
I
major
know.
left turn.
I know. Accept me for who I am. I'm sorry. Actually, no, I'm not going to apologize for that.
Tonight.
Huh?
We learned a lot about each other tonight, and so did the rest of the world.
Well, at the same time, it was never a secret. No one asked.
No, very true. This is very true.
But yes, yeah. So thank you for all of the information about sex magic and Holy Week, because now it really, like, all jokes aside, it does conceptualize it, and it makes it easier for me to see and kind of associate what I could possibly do with it. And I think there are a lot of folks who would also agree with me. So, but yeah, there's one thing I do want to address, because I've heard this before in passing on social media, is the idea of Christ and the idea of Santa Muerte, because Santa Muerte is represented as the Holy Death, and how there are folks out there who say that if you cannot be a Christian and you cannot be a Santa Muerte devotee, because they are opposite and basically hate each other, because Jesus had to descend into hell to defeat death. Now, because the both of you are more well versed in the idea and the aspect of Santa Muerte, how do you feel about that idea? Absolutely.
So I have a little bit of a different take on the whole concept in and of itself, because technically we're, a big part of the Christian faith is the belief that, like, after the final coming of Christ, like, there is no more death, like, and there's a final resurrection of everybody, and we kind of live on this new earth. So again, the other thing that will get me excommunicated tonight is that I've foregone believing a bodily resurrection. And so, like, as I look at Christ's passion, death, and resurrection, I look at it more from a metaphorical, symbolic um perspective, and I look at the resurrection as the passion and death and resurrection as kind of the understanding of the cycle of life. Like, like, this is the mystery that we enter into here is a cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. And so, like, for me, the Christian mystery is just one about, we enter into Christ's birth, we enter into his life, but we also enter into this mystery of going to death, going to the underworld, and being reborn from it. And so with that, death is an integral part of that process. And I think that as we look at kind of the process of spiritual evolution, no matter what tradition you're a part of, there's that element of life, death, rebirth built into that system. So this is our spiritual both rising and dying each and every day that we live, and as we kind of live out these mysteries. So that's kind of my 2 cents, where it's like, I don't believe in a physical bodily resurrection, but more so that this is symbolic of the death, birth, regeneration cycle. And so Santa Muerte is kind of the works and all that. Like, holy death is the works of what keeps that going. And the perfect archetype for that is Mary, because even after Christ died, before Mary's assumed into heaven, like, Mary had to die. Like, Mary had to go through the same death that her son went to. Mary had to go to the underworld also before she was assumed body and soul into heaven. And so I look at this whole thing as kind of a part of a greater scheme of life, death, and rebirth. And so that's my 2 cents.
The thing about it is oh, what were you gonna say? Go ahead, Ryan.
Oh no, I was just thank you for. I just want to say thank you for that take, Michael. Because I was just gonna add on, because Santa Muerte can also be seen as a psychopompic figure, like escorting us to wherever we believe we're meant to go after death. Not even necessarily just in the like Christian theology of heaven, hell, judgment, whatever, but just as that psychopompic figure of she's gonna be the one to guide us to that next plane. So even with Michael's perspective, it not just being a physical bodily death, but a metaphorical metaphysical death, there's still that aspect of Santa Muerte who's gonna be the one to help us transition. So either way, I definitely believe her playing a part, and that it's not impossible to have the two.
Absolutely. And I kind of subscribe to what Michael says about it's not necessarily a bodily resurrection, it's kind of a spiritual one, where you're because when I heard that, my initial thought was like, no, he didn't. Jesus did not defeat death because he died. So no, he did not. He did not defeat death because he died. and it goes into the whole idea of, I don't necessarily believe that like his physical body came back and like ascended into heaven. It's kind of just like his spiritual self went into hell and did what he had to do, and then kind of ascended into heaven and is seated at the right hand of the Father and blah blah blah. You know what I mean? So it, because I do in a sense believe. I'm still trying to figure it out, but like the thing that popped in my head when I first heard that was like, defeated death who? Defeated in what way? Because if that's the case, he wouldn't have died in the first place, so I mean that's just my brain working. It was an interesting idea that I came across once, and I just wanted to get your perspective on it. So thank you for giving me your input, the two of you, because it was interesting. It was a very interesting idea.
I just want to say one more point on that, because I had a really good friend who's also a gay Catholic and who has struggled with his faith for a really long time, and we got into this conversation about like, did Christ really rise from the dead? And my answer to him was, it really doesn't matter. Like, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter um if this story, if it happened for real or if it happened metaphorically. I was like, at the end of the day, what does Christ's death and resurrection mean to you? I think sometimes we get caught up on um the veracity of things. Is this really true? And if it's not really true, then we have to kind of like throw the whole baby out with the bathwater. But at the end of the day, if it happened for real or if it happened in a metaphorical spiritual sense, it really doesn't matter. It's the impact that this transition of the story of Christ going to his death, entering the underworld and then being resurrected, what impact does that make on you and your spiritual life and your spiritual journey? And if it makes no impact, go find another story. And I think it's at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter.
Right.
Right. Absolutely. Okay, I think that is a wonderful place to cap this episode. Don't you think?
Yeah, I don't have any
Unless
more questions.
anyone else-
This has been super enlightening.
Oh gosh, this is the second time that Michael has had a conversation with the two of us, and I can say with confidence in saying that it is always a fucking pleasure in any way to communicate with you, Michael. It is so enlightening always to communicate with you.
It's so much fun. I like people who I can just like fully be myself and they're not like taken aback when I'm just like, and we fuck Jesus during mass.
Oh no, absolutely. This is a safe place for you for sure. You are you can say all of those things and it's gonna be totally fine. And also I personally want to thank you, Michael, for donating so much of your time to be with us today, and also Ryan for donating your time because you're working on vacation. You're working on you being away and being with your boo. So thank you for spending the time with us, because I know that you want to be spending time with your boo.
Trust me, it ain't Holy Saturday, but we're gonna be fucking tonight.
Hey. But yeah, so with that said, my name is Fonzie. I am Witch Illumiscente on Instagram and Twitter.
And my name is Ryan, aka the Mestizo Mystic. You can find me on Instagram at the Mestizo Mystic, or at Twitter or on Twitter at Mestizo Mystic.
And I'm Michael, Saintly Tarot Mystic on Instagram, or Sacred Eyes Tarot on the interwebs.
And we will see you guys on our next Unholy Communion. Happy Easter! Have sex!
With Jesus!